With just 10 days away from the 2026 NFL Draft, it is time to talk to one of our favorite guests, Emory Hunt of Football Gameplan. He will join me on the other side of things. It's the DTereman Football Show. It is live on a Monday, and it starts right now.
You want to be a winner. Not only have to understand how to win, but to understand how to consistently win.
What is going on, Jets fans, and welcome into another episode of the DTereman Football Show. I am your host, DT. You heard it at the top. It is officially getting down to the wire with this 2026 NFL Draft. We have kind of talked so much about it, but here to talk a little bit more, go a little bit deeper in depth, somebody who studies these draft classes with a crazy amount of knowledge and input put into this entire process. We had him back on in August to talk about the 2025 class and the expectations for what they can do. But now it's time to talk about what the Jets strategy should be for the 2026 class. But before I bring on Emory Hunt, everyone, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are in the middle of our Curtis Martin mini helmet giveaway. So how that works is a $5 super chat will get you on the wheel, $10 will get you 2 entries, and etc. And also gifted memberships will count. One gifted membership is 1 entry on the raffle. And as soon as we get to 2,000 subscribers, we will give this helmet away to 1 lucky listener. So without further ado, let's bring on our guy, Emory Hunt, a top 1 guest around this time of year because he is so in the weeds with this draft class. Emory Hunt of Football Gameplan, man. How you doing? Thanks for coming back on.
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate you guys bringing me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I don't joke about that. You're a top 1 guest. I love getting your insight, all your knowledge. You have the local schools, the small school guys. Your draft guide is usually got a comma in it in terms of how many players you evaluate, which is just an incredible feat for a one-man scouting department, essentially. So before we even get into the class, just give us a little bit of the breakdown of just how much goes into this draft guide.
Man, that's a great question because as you or others may know, during the regular season of the NFL and college football, I'm an NFL and college football analyst. So I'm breaking down games and, giving predictions and all that stuff like that. And then I don't start diving into draft mode until January when I go to all 9 all-star game events, including the combine, and in the midst of studying these prospects. So my first time seeing a lot of these prospects will be live at these all-star games. And I go back and watch the film as I'm on the road. So some people may see me on the road and say, like, man, Emory just be at practice and we don't see him out that night because I'm back in the room watching film, try to hammer down all these prospects because I don't cover the draft all year round. And so it's a 3-month deal because at the end of the day, I get through all prospects that I have. And then the draft guide comes out usually first week of April, which it has for the last 3 years. So that's how we're able to get a bunch of prospects. But that's my process, man. It's I love it because it adds a different element to it. But it shows you how much work goes into, evaluating and really doing right by the role by getting out there and getting on the ground first.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you mentioned there, watching these players live. Now, I go to Senior Bowl. I've been there for about 5 years now. Didn't happen to catch you this year, but I did get you last year. We got to chop it up a little bit. What is the difference between watching a prospect on television versus watching them live at one of these events?
Well, we know the college websites will lie in terms of height and weight. So you're going to be at least 1.5 inches taller and about 10 pounds heavier on the college website. So when you see these guys in person, you see, okay, that's 6'1", that's 6'2", and you kind of already now have an idea of what you're going to see when you go in to watch these guys is also, false because TV won't show you true height and weight and true speed. Like you see speed, but when you up close and watching it live, you get to see the difference. And I feel like what has helped me over the years has been the ability to be at Giants and Jets training camp all the time, and being on the ground for pro level of athleticism and speed. So now, and body types, because that's also important too. When you go to these All-Star games, you're seeing body types. Who took the weight room seriously, who didn't do much of anything throughout the 4 years or 5 years they were in school. And that matters because when you see it at the pro level, you know what translates, you know what they look for, you know what they look like, and all of that starts to go hand in hand when you put together this draft guide.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of want to size these guys up, right? That the body type is really important because, like you said, those schools are a little bit more generous with their heights and weights. My funniest story from the combine or the Senior Bowl rather this past year was Darrell Jackson Jr. with 11-inch hands. I got to shake his hand in between practices. I swear that his finger and his thumb touched on the back of my palm because of how just 11 inches. You don't realize how big that is for a player, and then you see it on tape, and he's using his hands to his advantage, and good for him. But yeah, it's always interesting to have to size these guys up to put the number on paper to the size in real life. And then you mentioned it, speed, also physicality. Somebody from the 2025 Senior Bowl who I fell in love with was Malachi Corley because of his physicality and everything during practice. Obviously, it didn't translate for the Jets drafting him in the third round 2 years ago. So it's not always an exact science, but you definitely want to get up close and see these guys.
I say this too, and what's the beauty of going to all the different All-Star games? I was on a broadcast last year in the rain for the Tropical Bowl, and the guy that's on the roster right now for the Jets and Magdalena was the MVP of that game. Like stood out, like was from Fresno State, just was balling all week at practice. I'm calling the game. It's in the rain. The quarterback, honestly, at the time was Chandler Rogers, who is playing right now for the Louisville Kings in the UFL. So you see how it all comes full circle. You see guys and you grade a lot of guys. Now Magdalena would have been awesome. He was graded well in my draft guide last year. He ends up on the roster this year, but that's someone that many people probably would just thought afterthought. But I saw him up close and personal. Same thing with Brady Cook. I had a good grade on Brady Cook last year. I was high on Brady Cook, and lo and behold, he goes undrafted. But then he ends up starting games for the Jets. So that's the beauty of putting together the draft guide. You never know, who might stand out to you and where it may end up. And if that guy gets an opportunity, you just want to see how it all plays out.
100%. And you mentioned Magdalena is currently on the Jets roster. There are probably some diehards in this chat right now who don't know who Magdalena is. So can you give us a quick 30-second elevator pitch on Magdalena?
Physical, tough, plays above his size. I thought throughout the week of the Tropical Bowl last year, he's making a lot of big catches over the middle field, was getting smacked, but was getting right back up. And again, a lot of the passes, because it was raining out there, they weren't the best. But he's going up, making the plays that are there to be made, showed his ability as a return specialist, which I thought was going to get him on the board quickly. But I love the fact that he was, you saw a guy that was like 5'9", 190 pounds, but playing a lot bigger in terms of how he was taking those hits over the middle of the field. You thought he was 6'2", 225. So at least at worst, he's a core special teamer for your football team.
Absolutely love it. All right, let's get right into the 2026 class. I'll start you off with a slow pitch softball. Some of the position groups that you would consider a strength of this class, and then maybe a couple positions that you would consider a weakness. Maybe they have some top line guys and lack depth, or you really only see a couple of hits in the day 2, day 3 range. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this class?
Well, I don't really see strengths and weaknesses, to be honest, because I grade so many prospects. And so the one thing I have not become a fan of this draft cycle is folks saying, "Oh, this is a bad class. This is a bad class." But that's a cop out. I feel like that's a lazy man's way of avoiding doing the work. Sometimes you got to get a bigger shovel to dig deep. So because I grade so many players, I tend to see the positives in a lot of people. And so because every year you have, let's say, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 eligible, prospects, you mean tell me top 350, 400 ain't good? Like so that just never really sat right with me. But I think the reason why people have that sentiment is due to the fact that we've seen a lot of these dudes play for 5 years. So there's no like we've seen it all.
Mhm.
And we don't get that high level variance from, oh, this dude's a redshirt sophomore. Oh, this dude's a true junior. Why this redshirt freshman balling out and now he comes out as a redshirt sophomore. We've seen a lot of 4, 5, 6 year players in this class. So we've seen a lot of them. So they all are playing good football. They may not necessarily stand out, so to speak, but this is still a good draft, in my opinion, across the positions to fill spots into your on your football team. Some people may say, well, the quarterbacks and you said you had Mendoza was a second round talent, but he's going to go first overall. That doesn't mean that if you find a guy later in the draft at quarterback that he can't play for you. My Brady Cook this year will probably end up being a Haynes King, right? You know
Ooh,
what I'm saying?
okay.
Someone that you watch play, you watch Bo Nix play, it could be hit or miss for the first 3 quarters. But for the fourth quarter, Bo Nix locks in and he's able to get the job done. That's what Haynes King does. And so that's the type of guys you can find in this class. We're just not talking about them because it's not the flashy or sexiest, but I mean, we can get into the nitty gritty about all these prospects. But that's why, I tend to stand on this side of the fence and others are over there on that side of the fence.
Yeah, so we're looking right at you, and we say grab a bigger shovel, keep digging, and find the good prospects in this class. Because inevitably, in 3 or 4 years, when we look back on this class, we're going to say, "Damn, how did that guy go all the way at day 3? And how the heck did that like the Puka Nakuas of the world? Like, there's always
Right.
going to be those guys." So I really like how you frame that. It's not a strengths or weaknesses. It's just you got to keep digging. You got to find the positives of everything, and that's a really good thing because the draft is supposed to be a positive time for all 32 teams, right? It's not supposed to be something that we fight about and go back and forth and bicker and argue as fan bases. Like we're going to improve the team more likely than not, no matter who we draft. So let's start looking at it from a positive angle. And that really leads me right into my next question because a lot of players or fans, excuse me, have been arguing about these two specific players for the New York Jets. Now, we know the draft doesn't necessarily start at 1 this year. It's going to be Fernando Mendoza from Indiana. But at number 2 overall, the hottest debate right now, Arvell Reese versus David Bailey, the hybrid linebacker edge from Ohio State versus the pure pass rusher from Texas Tech. How do you stand on the Reese versus Bailey debate? Is there a third candidate that you would like to throw in the ring? As Jets Nation YouTube says, if Downs is the pick at 2, what are your thoughts? It could be a Tate, a Styles, a Downs, a Ruben Bain potentially. Where do you sit on the Arvell Reese, David Bailey, or is there a third guy in Emory's mind for the Jets at 2?
This is like someone sitting there arguing between, Ruth Chris and Flemings. And it's like, we're gonna have good steak regardless, guys.
Yep.
Just pick a spot, make sure they got reservations. So to be honest, they can't go wrong either way. I'll make the case for both of them. For David Bailey, you get the guy that is what you're gonna get right out of the pack. Straight pass rusher. He is relentless. He is gonna go from his edge to the quarterback, and that's what he's doing. Now, that's a great thing because it pairs perfectly with Will McDonald. So now you got, you got your bookends. But with Arvell Reese, you look at, okay, this week we need you to be straight pass rusher. This matchup, we like you to be more of an inside linebacker. We would rather see you there. This week, we kind of want you to be a zone drop guy in the curl flat area, kind of hook the curl area. We kind of want to use your athleticism, take away this quick passing game. So that's what you get with an Arvell Reese. You get someone that's a game day matchup piece. It depends on who the matchup is and where they feel like they can best utilize him on that specific day. For Bailey, it's like, hey, they're going to have to figure out how to block him. Either going to have to double him or Will McDonald's going to go off or they double Will McDonald. Bailey's going to eat. So the Jets can't make a bad decision out of those two players. Even if you want to push a Caleb Downs in, the reason why I like Downs as an option too is the fact that you get a true quarterback on defense at safety. The Jets can find ways to create pass rush. I think Joseph Asai is an ascending player. It gives you a chance to really, see what he got. You paid him. They've done stuff like this before, so he could end up being the guy. So you can kind of go get the safety, but you double down on safety last year. And I think that, you got safety last year with Malachi Moore, who I was a big fan of. And also you bring in Minkah Fitzpatrick. I don't know. Minkah Fitzpatrick to me he's the Noah Fant of defense because It's a really good football player, but he's always on the move. It's like Brandon Cooks. It's like, man, what is he doing wrong to always be on the move and still produce? So you got two safeties. Now, if you want to get a third safety and get creative, cool. That's unique. But if it came down to Arvell Reese or David Bailey, there are no wrong answers in that regard because they both bring something to the table that the Jets can utilize.
Yeah, that's kind of been my whole sentiment on this argument too, is you're getting an immediate impact player on the front seven of your defense, regardless of who you take. And I don't like to necessarily say they can't get it wrong because they're the Jets and they probably could still get it wrong. But what it comes down to and what it boils down to for me is the developmental plan for Arvell Reese. Like you said, he's a matchup player. You can play him in 3 or 4 different roles week in and week out, or David Bailey? Which developmental plan do they feel the most confident about? And that's the player I want them to draft. So taking my personal opinion out of it, I think, David Bailey is like a Hess truck or an RC car that already comes with the batteries. You pull him out of the box and he just goes right away. Arvell Reese, there's a bit of gray area. So you do have to, have the coaching plan, the developmental plan in place. But I lean Reese as of today, but like you said, I'm in the minority that I don't think they can go wrong, and I would like either as long as their plan in place is pretty succinct.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. You got like all of that's why I don't necessarily get too bogged down in the offensive line talk when folks say, "Well, do you see him as a guard? Do you see him as a tackle?" Like I'm gonna grade him what he did on film in college, and I let the individual team figure that out. Now I may put a note in there, like he has some crossover ability to where you could see him inside or see him outside, but different teams may see players differently. Like you said, some people may see Reese as an inside backer, some may see him as a true edge, some may see him as an off-ball backer. That's for the team to figure out. I'll just grade what I've seen on film and let the specific team figure that out for themselves.
Absolutely. We're talking to Emory Hunt of Football Game Plan. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We do have a $20 super chat from Astral is off the chain. Thank you so much, Astral. Sign me up for that helmet. He is in the raffle for 4 entries for the Curtis Martin helmet. And once again, our guy Jake Asman gifts a membership to the A1 since day one community. Thank you so much, Jake. I appreciate your generosity. All right, getting back into this one. We've talked about the debate at 2. Obviously, the Jets have 2 first-round picks. There's a lot of smoke going around right now that they could trade up to as high as 7 with the Commanders for Carnell Tate. That seems to be the most recent rumor as we get into this draft process here. Teams are filling out their big boards, making calls from GM to GM saying, how do you feel about moving out of this spot or trading out of this spot here? Wide receiver has to be a priority for the Jets. They didn't sign one in free agency. They didn't really go out and get one in the trade market. I know we talked about Mac Delane as somebody that is a sleeper on the practice squad type of roster spots, but how do you evaluate this wide receiver class in the first 1 or 2 rounds, maybe like the first 6 to 7 guys off the board? We keep harping on this compliment to Garrett Wilson type of pick at the wide receiver position, but does it necessarily need to complement Garrett, or could it also complement an Adonai Mitchell for the Jets? How do you see this board stacking up at wide receiver?
I'll start by saying who I have graded and how I have graded. I grade the receiver position in 4 different spots. X receiver, Z receiver, slot receiver, big inside receiver with the prototype being like Marcus Colson. Although a few years back, Urban Charles was, I think, my number 1 inside receiver when he was coming out of the IUP. But it's that type of prototype that could play outside or inside. So my number 1 X is Jordan Tyson. My number 1 Z is Carnell Tate. My number 1 slot is Mekhi Lemon, and my number 1 inside receiver this year is Denzel Boston. So any one of those 4 work because of something you touched on, and we've seen this time and time again over the course I've been watching the NFL. I'll be 45 at the end of May. So when I look at how stuff, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We tend to get bogged down on complimentary, but what you really want is competency. And so we saw Dan Marino do great things with the Marks brothers, Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. They were both 5'9". Like, that didn't matter. We saw the Washington Commanders, then Redskins at the time, go from the Smurfs in the early 80s to the Posse in the later part of the 80s and early 90s with Art Monk and Ricky Sanders and Gary Clark. And then we've seen, we saw the Three Amigos with John Elway and his Bronco receivers in the 80s. And then you saw all the tall receivers with the Vikings in 98 with Jake Reed, Randy Moss, and Chris Carter. So we've seen all types. The thing is getting good players because whether it's Cornell Tate, Denzel Boston, Mekhi Lemon, you know, or Jordan Tyson, all of those help the situation because all of those guys, especially nowadays in football, they all have crossover skills. So we're really splitting hairs when we're talking about, where guys can best fit. That's just how I see it in terms of like the positioning and how you evaluate. But all of these guys were number ones of their respective teams. Outside of Cornell Tate, who was a quiet 1B to Jeremiah Smith's loud 1A. It's very similar to what we've seen from Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, and what we've seen from Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. So we've seen that happen before. But I feel like any one of these guys are very much capable as long as they can do their 111, play their role, be good, be versatile. And I see all of those four at least are fine. If they bypass those four, someone like a Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee can, be a good vertical stretch player, got good size, good ability to go play above the rim. I'm a big Ted Hurst guy. Watching him just be explosive and aggressive at the catch point, after the catch. And so for me, it's Malachi Fields gives you a nice big body possession receiver that may not get the separation, but can go up and make the contested play. So those are all kind of options that the Jets can figure out how they want to attack it. You may not have to trade up to go get a guy. You can probably stand pat and get a guy, or wait till round 2. You pick 33. You can easily trade back in around 1 if you felt pressed to do so, or just stay right there at 33 and take one of those guys that are not taken in the first round.
So somebody you didn't mention at the position that the Jets are being very heavily linked to at 16 is Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana, obviously national championship winner. Do you think that would be another one of those solid picks? I know he's not a top XZ slot or big inside guy, but how would you, say the Jets fared if they got Omar Cooper at 16 overall?
I think that would be a little bit too rich for my blood at 16. I feel like Omar Cooper is a solid player. I know he had the catch against Penn State. He can play, but when we're talking about constant threats and constant big plays and gotta have it, I would probably, especially at 16, if we're talking about, I would stay away from that. I would probably go to another position. And I would even, if it came down to Omar Cooper or a Jeremy Bernard, I probably lean more toward Jeremy Bernard than Omar Cooper, because of how Bernard plays, physical, need to have it moments. Although we did see one of the biggest need to have it moments by Omar Cooper,
Yes.
At Penn State. But you talk about Jeremy Bernard bailing out Ty Simpson time and time again. That's someone that I would say with pick 33 would be more along the lines of that as opposed to pick 16.
Yeah, I love Jeremy Bernard. I'm glad you said it. I was so upset when he didn't go down to Mobile. I know he was supposed to. He was invited, accepted the invite, and then like a week or two before he ended up not going. But Jeremy Bernard is the guy that I've been kind of stamping as my guy at 33. Obviously, the hope is you could get him at like pick 44, of course. And I feel like that's the case for every prospect. It's, I would take him here, but I would love to get him 10 spots later. Of course, that's how the draft works. But Jeremy Bernard to me he's my number 5 behind Omar Cooper, and it's very close. Like they're both second round guys for me. I would be happier with Bernard at 33 than Cooper at 16, like you mentioned. And somebody you also mentioned during that talking about Jeremy Bernard is Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama. I feel like he has to be talked about with this Jets team. They currently only have Geno Smith in the room. Obviously, Brady Cook is the immediate backup, or possibly Bailey Zappi right now coming in on a futures contract. How do you feel about Ty Simpson versus the other quarterbacks in this class? I think he's pretty solidified as quarterback 2 behind Fernando Mendoza, but things changed, right? He probably wasn't quarterback 2 for a lot of people before Dante Moore went back to school. Then you obviously had a lot of like Darian Mensahs, Lenora Sellers also go back to school. Where do you stack Ty Simpson in this quarterback class? And similarly to Omar Cooper Jr., is he worth the pick at 16, or is he somebody that's like, okay, 33 or a potential trade up for Ty?
Ty Simpson is my QB6 in the class, and has a very similar grade to a Brady Cook that I had last year.
Okay.
And so for me, QB2 is Taylor Green of Arkansas.
Like that. Yeah.
And so for Ty Simpson, um, today's game is about athleticism, and you have to be able to create your own shot, so to speak. Now there are times where Ty Simpson has done that. I actually thought he played well in the game they got blown out in, and that was the game against Florida State. Felt like he competed like a dog in there in that game. When everybody else kind of gave up. So and that just started how he got off to a great start. Third downs against Georgia, he was always finding ways to keep them on the field, and he had some great throws against Missouri. Some of the better throws he had all season were in that Missouri game, placement wise. But then the things that you like about Ty Simpson all go awry when he's face versus pressure, and we know the NFL is 60 minutes of pressure for 17 weeks. So how do you handle pressure? Can you play above the X's and O's? And that's where I think Ty Simpson still has to flatline his play. Now, it's funny to watch this whole draft cycle. People talk out both sides of their mouth because we just spent all last year talking about Anthony Richardson's 15 games, as a starter at Florida, the games he played at Florida, and now we're willing to take 15 games of Ty Simpson, which 8 of them, very inconsistent, 12 games, whatever it was, high in the first round. Like we don't learn from mistakes, so to speak. And Richardson had the trump card of having the top tier athleticism that you can kind of, work with. Ty Simpson doesn't have that. And so when you really peel back the layers and like, man, what are we doing here? If we go pound for pound, is he better than Carson Beck? Is he better than a Haynes King? Is he better than the Drew Aller? Is he better than the Taylor Green? If we're really looking at this, from a prospect perspective, I don't think so. But that's not to say he can't be a guy that can do his 111 like Fernando Mendoza. It's just that he's going to need more to do his 111 than these other guys have proven, to be able to rise above the situation and the circumstance. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, you talk about 16. I think that would be. I don't think that would be wise for the Jets. I would say if we're talking pick 33, sure, and that's where the conversation starts for me.
Yeah, that's very fair. You're probably the first person that has said Ty Simpson as low as quarterback 6. So my follow up to that was how far is the drop off to the next quarterback you had? But let's flip that around. How much of a drop off is it from your quarterback 5 to Ty Simpson at 6? I know you mentioned Aller, King, and Beck in that mix. Are you thinking that the Jets should probably steer more that route and attack them at like rounds 3 to 5 as opposed to trying to force a Ty Simpson maybe at 33 or 44?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, man, it's about the 53. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, and I've always felt like this. We, as in the media collective, put too much emphasis on the quarterback. The team has to be good. If the team is not good, it doesn't matter who you have there. They're not going to be able to save that whole team. So we put so much praise on these quarterbacks to where we think they have a magic wand to where they can make everybody around them better. I'm sorry, you can't do that. Allen Iverson said it best. Like, how can I make him better? Like, you know what I'm saying? I can't do that. And so that's the thing with this quarterback conversation. And I feel like if people focused on making sure you've quarterback proofed your roster, then a quarterback can step in and do his 111, i.e., a Sam Darnold, what he did with Seattle last year, i.e., what Drake May was doing with New England. Now, it will come to a point in time in a game where you're going to need that quarterback to do his 111, and that's when they have to make plays. Like you could even set up to say, man, I just need you to make 5 passes a game. In terms of these critical situations, I need you to make this throw. And he can make the throw, and you can move on. And so, but sometimes guys are not able to play above that. But that's why you have to find ways to quarterback proof. The TV and media side of things, we talk about is the quarterback. Quarterback. But we lose sight of how you build the 53. That includes special teams, all that stuff that nobody wants to talk about. And we boil it down to you need a quarterback. You can't win with this quarterback. Well, we've seen history show us you can win without this mythical franchise quarterback that everyone loves to describe. So make sure the 53 is straight. I think the Jets are on the right track in terms of some of the talent that they have on the roster before you start, saying this one QB will be the savior. Because remember, these people that talked about these quarterbacks last year around this time told us all these quarterbacks were going to be great, and all these quarterbacks we're talking about now that are in this class that some of them could have came out last year are still what we thought about them. As the season wore on, like maybe these guys are just kind of like glorified QB2s, spot starters, or starters that can come from later rounds to where you don't feel forced and pressed to take one very early.
Yeah. My two narratives with the quarterback position, and you kind of mentioned it, you have to dummy proof the offense. Make sure there's enough playmakers, play callers, and protection around the three P's of the quarterback to make sure that you're getting the truest evaluation of a guy, because you don't want to throw somebody out there sort of like Zach Wilson, right? And he didn't really have a ton of talent around him. Obviously, it was sink or swim, and he very much sank. But yeah, you want to make sure that you have the roster really put in place around them, because you can't just plop in a quarterback and just expect him to elevate everybody else. And then the other narrative with the quarterbacks that I've been kind of harping on with Simpson specifically, if the Jets think he's going to be a top half of the league passer before they have to decide on his fifth-year option, it's probably worth the swing. So do you somewhat agree with that sentiment of, like, if Ty Simpson is the 17th best passer coming out of year two, maybe that's like a enough of a success barometer that makes it worth taking him?
I'll answer it this way simply, and this is how teams should look at it. What do your eyes tell you? If we got to find a creative, nuanced way to say, all right, let's pull a trigger because of the fifth-year option, and we can then kick this can. Is he good enough? Because if that's not the answer, then all of this is just trying to see what you want to see. That's the whole part of it. And I always use this analogy, and I'm half joking when I say this, because he was a good player, and some of the things that we saw him do in the pros, he was doing in college at Notre Dame. Is Joe Montana, right? And so he goes in round 3, and Bill Walsh, all we talk about is Bill Walsh, the late great Bill Walsh's West Coast offense is this, is the new, everybody try to copy the West Coast offense. Well, was it the offense, or was it the fact that this man had easy buttons all across the offense for Joe Montana to step in and play? You had Jerry Rice, John Taylor, Brent Jones, Tom Rathman, Roger Craig, a great offensive line led by Justice Apolu, Randy Cross. Like, all Joe Montana had to do was just play his 111. Now, granted, he was smoking Joe, right? But that's the example of what I'm talking about of, hey, man, let's make sure our roster is good. And therefore, we don't put all that pressure on a quarterback, because if we're just watching Ty Simpson and you kind of, you squirming and trying to figure it out, then there's your answer, man.
Yep. Yeah. No, I certainly agree. You have to have conviction, especially at the quarterback position. You can get away with, not having entire conviction at like an edge rusher or a safety or offensive guard. But when it comes to quarterback, you really have to know what you're seeing, trust what you're seeing, trust that you have the plan to see it through, to progress through that person's career. Because if not, you're going to end up falling on your face. And then 6 years later, we're still trying to recover from the Zach Wilson pick. So we can't really do that again. You talked about building out the roster. So this is going to be the second to last question here. Some under the radar prospects that you think the Jets, maybe not even the Jets, but somebody on day 3 is really going to come around and say, hey, we didn't know too much about this guy, or we potentially didn't have eyes on this guy, but he's actually doing a lot of good things in the pre-draft process. Somebody who's probably going a round or two a little bit later than they maybe should be, in your opinion. Who are some of Emory's under the radar prospects in the 2026 class?
My QB7, so right behind Ty Simpson, is Derek Robertson of Monmouth, local kid. I caught a lot of his games, man. And the running joke during the broadcast was if you lose a possession of Monmouth, you're down 2 scores because they're scoring and they were averaging 35, 40 points a game. If he doesn't get hurt against Delaware State, they end up probably playing Montana State for the national championship because that offense was humming. And I was glad to see he ran 4.6 at his pro day. I didn't know he had it in him, because he's out there slinging the ball all around the yard. Like he was very Jared Goff like in terms of his build, very slenderly built. But then he added some bulk, healthy now, throwing the ball. He was at the FCS showcase, which was right before the national championship game. Then he flew down to the Hula Bowl, had a great week there, performing in front of the scouts and everyone. And he's been making the rounds as well. He was at the Jets and Giants local day too. But Derek Robertson is a fantastic quarterback. That's somebody that I'm rooting for, because I've seen him play. I've seen what that placement looks like down the field. And talk about making the right throw at the right time. Like he is someone that definitely has that game. Now, if we're moving on from quarterback, I would say another one of my guys that I, again, watched him a lot. I know his dad. His dad was a former kicker in the NFL, Jimmy Kibble. And a funny story about him at Georgetown. So 6'1", 200 pounds, 4.45. He had a viral play this year during the season where he went up and mossed a kid from Morgan State for the game winner at a Hail Mary, right? Which earned him an appearance on a Jimmy Kimmel show because of his name, which it was funny to see that whole thing play out. But this dude can flat out ball. Another one that people sleep on as it turns from the FCS, Eric Hunter, inside linebacker, Morgan State. And I know I'm relying a lot on guys whose games I've called, but it shows you how many games I've seen of these guys to feel confident to say this. But Eric Hunter, 6'3", 230, Morgan State, a good athlete. I thought last year the best defensive player in the FCS was Eric Williams of Morgan State. Elijah Williams, who ended up going undrafted but signing right away to the Minnesota Vikings. Balled out in the preseason and was part of the 53 and was in the rotation. Might end up starting this year. Hunter was second on that team because of how well he could fly around the field. Was at the American Bowl, balled out there, catching picks every day in practice. Goes to the HBCU Legacy Bowl, continues to ball out there, even though he didn't have to play. Couple catching interceptions in practice, and he goes to the HBCU showcase combine, which was a week and a half ago down at the Washington Commanders facility, ran 4.4. So he has had a fantastic offseason. And I'll give you one more. This was Jordan Williams of Bethel University, Division III program. When I say the kid, it's like 6 feet, 210, combo safety. He can block punts. He can play nickelbacker. He can, cover kicks. He can cover receivers. He was a cornerback, moved to safety. So he has cover skills. He has ball skills, has the fluid athleticism. And he matches up rather well because he checked all those boxes athletically, despite coming from a Division III program. So those are some of those sleeper guys, those deep sleepers. We're talking about late day 3, if not priority free agents, but guys that I was so excited about watching, here in his draft class.
That's amazing because I feel like if you just posted a graphic of your top quarterback big board and you had Ty Simpson and then a guy from Monmouth University one spot behind him, people would be like, what the hell is Emory doing here? Like he's just, he's going crazy. He's going against the grain too hard at this point, but you really bring up a lot of good points. And I feel like this is the part of the draft season why I am just so, I love having you on because 4 players I've never heard of in my, the whole time I've been doing this process. So you've handed me the shovel and now I have to go dig and find out if these guys are going to be good or not. So
I will say this about here's the part that people underestimate about me calling games. Mm-hmm. Is that I see what scouts come in. So if I'm calling these games, I'm like, man, they got like 15 scouts here.
Yep.
To watch Derek Robertson. Although I'm judging based off talent, but I'm no dummy to see, the dudes that I see coming in these games, so That's also the beauty about being there, because now I get the intel of like, I'm just not pulling this out the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I've seen scouts constantly at these places talking to these guys. And there's a bunch of guys too. I just have, in fact, for the draft guide this year, I have about 430 uh, guys from FCS, D2, D3, NAIA,
Wow.
U Sports level just in this guide alone. So there's still a lot of. Yeah, I'll give you another one. Ryan Schrenecki, the left tackle at Kutztown, D2 guy nearby, 6'7", 315, was at the Hula Bowl. Did a really good job against Power 5 competition. But the fact that he came in at a legit 6'7", and didn't transfer up, I'm glad to see that. Otherwise, we'd be talking about a guy from Central Michigan who transferred up and didn't, but he did his thing, held his own. I'll give you one more too, because I'm in a row. Tight end, Michael Brescia. And here's the unique part about this, and this is why you got to dig a little deep. So if you just go look at Western Michigan's receivers this year, you'll see the starting tight end had a pretty solid season. He's in this draft class too. And Brescia probably had like 9 receptions. You're like, man, what the hell is Emory talking about? Well, when you watch him play, you see the fluidity, you see the movement, you see the athleticism. And if he's only had 1 year of football at the FBS level at Western Michigan, which was this year, because he spent the previous 4 years as a starting all Patriot League quarterback at Colgate. So you rewind, you think about, okay, this dude was the starting quarterback at Colgate, transferred to Western Michigan where he moved positions. Think about what that means if you get him on your football team. Now, when we talk about Wildcat and inside the red zone, inside the green zone, short yardage situations, here's a guy that actually can handle the football and is a threat to throw on top of being a fantastic athlete. So that's one situation of where I'm going back to the first part of the conversation. If you dig a little deeper, you'll find this guy's got a lot of gems in it.
Hell yeah. Six brand new names for Jets fans to start looking up. We're talking with Emory Hunt of Football Game Plan. I posted a link to Emory's Twitter account as well as his draft guide, so consider purchasing that. I believe it's $25, so a really healthy price point for the amount of players you're getting. He just said 400 FBS Division 2 or 3 players. Like, most big boards from national media guys only go 3 to 350 deep of Division 1 FCS schools. So Emory's really doing the deep dive here. 2 quick super chats and memberships gifted. 6 rings says at pick 31, Patriots trade it for AJ Brown. So I'll throw this to you. He is a resident Patriots fan in the community. Would you think that 31 for AJ Brown is a little too high for the Patriots to give up?
Not at all. Because my thing is, this is why I love what the Rams do, but you have to trust your scouts to do so. If you're going to trade first round picks, you better trade them for known assets, and trust that your scouts could nail the rest of the draft. And that's why the Rams were able to do that for years, like giving up first round picks for known commodities that help them right away. Because that's all what you want as a first round pick. You want someone that can help you right now. And so if I know I can get an AJ Brown for pick 31, I'm doing it, because hey, we'll, do our due diligence and scout away on the back end part of the draft and do it that way, because that's a great trade-off, of course, especially because you pick 31. So I'm giving off, a guy that, you hope is on your team for 3 to 4 years. What we know we're going to get from an AJ Brown. So trade that off and focus on the rest of the draft. That is an excellent move.
Hell yeah. I think the value pretty much lines up there. You're not getting a wide receiver at 31 that is going to be A.J. Brown's caliber. And plus, you pair him back up with Mike Vrabel, his former coach in Tennessee, who didn't want to let him go the first time he had him in the building. So, yeah, I think that's a really good explanation there. Ted Ruggiero says, or gifted 5 memberships to the Dylan Tereman A1 since day one community. Thank you, Ted. You are in the raffle for 5 more for the Curtis Martin jersey. All right, I know we've gone over a little bit. I just want to get your quick takes on 2 defensive tackles. Being the DT football show, we have to talk about some defensive tackles. 2 guys, Senior Bowl guys, I saw up close and personal and kind of fell in love with throughout the process. Grayson Holton from Oklahoma and Zane Durant from Penn State. I think the evaluations are a little bit skewed on these guys. Some have them as day 2, possibly early day 3. Where do you sit on Holton and Zane Durant?
Holton I like a lot, man. Holton has good quickness off the ball. very much a disruptive force on the interior. Classic three technique. This is someone that is definitely one of those high second round type talents. Zane Durant played a lot of football, man, and it's wild to think how much he's played at Penn State. And I think he's more of a rotational player, definitely a day three type guy, but definitely one that you'll see end up playing like 7, 8 years in the league, just being a nice rotational piece. It's weird though, man, because as I'm watching these UFL games, and you're like, damn, this dude was a third round pick in 2023. It's like, man, time flies, but how quickly you really can be in and out the league. And so, we all got, we hopefully are being careful with projections of rounds about how guys are going to make it, but we see them as prospects. But very big fan of what Grayson Holton was able to do at Oklahoma defensively. That was a very good defense. R. Mason Thomas, him, and a couple other guys really stood out.
Yeah, whenever I watch an offensive prospect, I try to see if they played Oklahoma, because you want to see them go up against the best of the best. So Oklahoma is a defense that I've frequented on all 22 because they were just so dominant and quarterback nightmares more often than not. Obviously, Ty Simpson, who we talked about. So Emory, I know I took you 15 minutes longer than I asked you for originally, 30, 35 minutes. Please plug the channel, plug the show, everything you're working on with the guide. Where can people find all your work?
I will say this. There was something I saw right here in the chat right here. I want to make sure I spotlight that. Mr. Bonesy3682. He said, wait, I'm confused. How do you feel about the great Brady Cook last year? Weren't you high on him? And then compare him to Ty Simpson. LOL, I'll stop. I'm sorry. But that's a great question, right? Because people always want to bring that up. But, we saw Brady Cook go from undrafted to starting games. And he played well in the preseason to earn that spot.
Yes.
And so maybe you are not looking at Brady Cook the same way, and maybe I'm just looking at Ty Simpson with realistic expectations, because we tend to overhype these QBs. What you will not see me do, and you will not see me do in my draft guide, is not stand down on an evaluation until I was proven otherwise, right? Both right or wrong. Because case in point, there are some big people out there that'll say I had Shedeur Sanders as a top 20 overall player in the class, but not see him as a top 10 talent, a top 10 quarterback down the line in the league. Well, that doesn't make sense, right? Because if that's the case, then how is he your top 20 overall in the draft class? You even saw some people with Shedeur Sanders say he was, for all of last year, was there one or two at worst, or a top 40 talent. And just because he goes in round 5, instead of saying the Browns got great value, all of a sudden nowadays they are saying, well, Dylan Gabriel is better than him, or Garrett Nussmeier, all these other players. But wait a minute, you just had him as QB1. Like what he hadn't played yet, and then when he gets out there, he outperforms all the quarterbacks on the roster. So my thing is, all I'm saying is this: my draft guide is my own evaluation. It doesn't get swayed by, the what the wind is telling me. Like, you don't like one guy now, and then the momentum is going here. You dislike him over here. Stand firm. And plus, because these are written reports, right, wrong, or indifferent, they are there in perpetuity. They're out there. So you can get this draft guide, because it's the best one out there. Is full scout reports, over 1,200 this year. It was over 1,200 last year. And if you purchase the guide since 2020, right now you would have over 6,600 individual scout reports at your disposal, which helps you not only have a great gauge on everybody around the NFL, but if football is your thing, CFL, UFL, European League of Football, you pretty much have a good gauge on that as well, too. That's why this guide is the best one out there. Footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. It's cheaper than gas, the best guide you can go out there and get.
No, the first part is definitely true. It is cheaper than gas. And I put the link down in the chat below for everybody to check out. Emory, thank you so much. We'll have to have you on a couple weeks after the draft and really break down this class and some of the UDFAs, because, like you said, 1,200 players in the guide. I'm sure even the UDFAs that get scooped up after the process are going to be on the list.
Case in point, Ryan Clark's son. Had a report on him, one of my favorite slot corners in the draft. He's out there playing too. So again, I say we as in football gameplay, but I put in all of this depth of reports, man. Because again, you got to go out. If you're gonna do it, you got to go out there and do it. And so that's why, it's not evasive of not answering the question of strengths and weaknesses in a guide. It's just about, in the draft class, it's just about, bro, I just see a lot of football over the course of 12 months, and I like a lot of what I see, regardless. But my perception is a little bit different because, full disclosure, I played at University of Louisiana. Obviously, you see right there, shout out to the Raging Cajuns. But so I've seen the gambit on my teammates. Like, I played with Charles Tillman. I played with Ike Taylor. You talk about borderline Hall of Famers right here, right? Ike at least is a Steelers, Hall of Famer. I also played with Fred Stamps, who was a dog at receiver, but he's going to be in the CFL Hall of Fame. They already retired his jersey with the Edmonton Elks. Donovan Morgan, when the Arena League was the Arena League, he was Captain Morgan. He was all AFL with the Philadelphia Soul and the LA Kiss. Kyrie Saber, CFL Hall of Famer future. Also played like 5 years in the NFL too as a core special team and made a Pro Bowl with the Bengals. So I've seen the NFL guys and the AFL guys, but I know that there's talent everywhere because all of these dudes was nice. But they just had different careers at different spots. So that's why I put all of that type of information of the ranking the guys from Monmouth next to the guys from Bama, next to the guys from Bethel, next to the guys from Indiana Wesleyan. I just put everybody in the guide, man, because I know there's talent out there everywhere. So I appreciate the support from all of you guys, Jets fans, everybody out there. But again, footballgameplan.com/2026 draft guide.
Absolutely. Emory, for the man with the biggest shovel in the draft community, thank you again so much for hopping on, and I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
All right. Take care. All right. So that's Emory Hunt. Like I said, a top one guest in this entire process. I've had him on when I was on with Jet Nation when it was Glenn and I. I've had him on a couple times individually now on my channel, and you guys saw it. That is the proof. He is not going to give you your echo chamber opinion, right? He's going to have his own original takes and evaluations on guys, and he doesn't really care if it doesn't align with the top guys like Mel Kiper and Matt Miller and things of that nature. So really appreciate Emory for hopping on. I'm going to stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes. I saw a lot of questions that we couldn't get to. I feel a little bad. We took 15 extra minutes from Emory. He was only supposed to give us 30 to 35, but he was generous enough to give us 50 minutes of his time. But I see a lot of you guys in the room, 89 to be specific. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you are new to the channel, and super chats will get you on the wheel for the Curtis Martin signed mini helmet. 5 is 1, 10 is 2, and etc. Gifted memberships work as well. 1 gifted membership is 1 entry on the wheel for the Curtis Martin helmet. Have a couple of questions starred here. I couldn't ask Emory all the questions because I didn't want to keep them for over an hour, but we'll start with Kyle Clifton here. Styles is there at 6. Jets offer 16, a second round swap this year, 33 for 39, so they move back 6 spots. Next year's second, a third in 28, and 140 this year. I think the Browns would do this, Kyle. I think that they would move up. Yeah, they would take this deal, and I think the Jets probably wouldn't take this deal. I don't think they want to deal next year's second rounder. I'm sure you did the points equation and everything lines up properly. I just think it's a little too rich for the Jets to give up 2027 capital, especially those first or second round picks. Again, and you're also coming up for Sonny Styles, who is a player I really like. He's the number 2 player on my board behind Caleb Downs. I just don't know if trading all of that for a linebacker is worth it. So I would say the Browns do say yes to this, but the Jets probably say no. All right, we got Sean in here. He says, if we went Kenyon Sadiq and Olajuwon at 16, would you take Elijah Surratt later? I feel like he could be that dude if we miss out on the top 4. So Elijah Surratt to me is probably going to end up as my wide receiver 9. So I have it Lemon, Tate, Tyson, Cooper, Bernard, KC, Denzel, Brazel, and then Elijah Surratt is probably my 9th. So I wouldn't hate this. I would hope that at 16 they got Vanga over Kenyon Sadiq. As much as I like Sadiq, I just don't think taking a tight end at 16 and forcing yourself to play 12 personnel with, a pseudo 11 personnel look, as Sadiq is going to be your big slot. I don't know. I just don't think that that's the best allocation of resources. So if they took Vanga at 16 and then Elijah Surratt later, 33, 44, obviously a trade down would probably be the most beneficial there. But I could see it. I just hope that they don't miss out on the top 4 wide receivers or whoever they have as their top 4 wide receivers, because that would just mean that Muji probably didn't read the board well enough in terms of what the rest of the league is doing. So I hope that they were able to be aggressive, even if it is calculated aggression, to go up and get one of those top wide receivers. Our guy Lou B in here, he says DT's the best. Appreciate it, Lou. Saw you got the call up from the Jets for the draft. That's going to be amazing, man. I mean, you deserve it. You're a true super fan, like your name says. So that's going to be awesome. Looking forward to all that content. Unfortunately, they're probably not going to draft your guy, but that's okay. Jeremiah Love will be a great prospect for somebody else in the NFL. I appreciate it, Lou. And then our guy, Indy Jets fan, what's up, man? I appreciate you hopping in here during a live. I hope you're doing well, feeling good. He says, can we use 2027 draft picks this year and get Reese, Downs, or Styles? Okay, so hypothetically, instead of Reese, we'll say Bailey. So if they get Reese or let's say Tate at 2, could they trade up for a Bailey, Downs, Styles, a Reese? I could see it. Would I want them to use 2027 capital to do it? Probably not. I think 16 and 44 are basically a 1-to-1 equivalent for the 7th overall pick. So I would rather sacrifice, pick 44 in this class as opposed to a first or second next year. But I do think that having all those draft picks certainly will give Muji that flexibility of, hey, that guy fell to 11 and we really didn't see him falling to 11. Maybe we have to get aggressive and go up and get the guy. So yeah, I could see it. I don't know if I personally would want to do it, but I think that there's a small chance in a small world where they would let go of some of that capital to make a big swing. And obviously, I don't know if a lot of people saw it or not yet. Albert Breer came out with a story and talked about how David Bailey is not a fait accompli as much anymore at number 2 overall. Surprise, surprise. And then he did put in the extra bit about being nervous that ownership is going to step in and force the hand of Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn on some of these prospects. So I would just hope that Muji doesn't come in and say, hey, yeah, let's go get completely aggressive and trade away a lot of our future capital, because if these guys aren't the ones making the picks, it's going to be tough. Indy with a follow-up, he says, if you're on the hot seat, wouldn't you do whatever you need to? 2027 first-round picks are in play, I think. Sure, like I said, I think that they could be in play, and the hot seat aspect of this certainly is going to force hands a little bit more than they might want them to. I just don't know if even under those circumstances they will give up a first-round pick. I'd say I'd feel comfortable with a second-round pick in 2027, but especially without knowing how the Colts pick is going to fare, right? That could be an easy non-playoff pick like it is this year in the top 16. Dallas or Green Bay, whichever is better of the two, one of those two teams could fall off and have a top 10 pick. If you trade those picks in this draft without knowing the full result of where that pick is going to line up, it makes me really nervous. So the only pick I would say I would trade in this scenario is probably the Jets' organic first-round pick. And some people would probably push back and say, well, that's going to be the best pick of the 3 because the Jets are going to suck. And that's, again, very well a possibility. I just don't know if I'm willing to do it. I hope Woody doesn't force anybody to do it. And I think that they can get away with trading less than first-round picks to move around the board this year. But it is a really good question, and I know you've been talking about this for a while, because fans are just like, no, let's hoard all our picks. Let's have 32 first-round picks next year. That way Arch Manning can't run and hide, and he has to be a New York Jets. So, yeah, I totally see a world where their backs are against the wall and they'll have to utilize some of these picks. M. Villette says Mike LaFleur will love. Yeah, if they take Jeremiah Love at 3, I still think they're going to go Francis Maui-Noah. But if Arvell Reese is on the board, I think they would go Arvell Reese at 3, which is also very funny, right? If the Jets don't take him at 2, he's probably going number 3. Whereas if they don't take Bailey at 2, maybe he goes 4 to the Titans, who he visited with. Maybe he goes 7 to the Commanders or even later. So it is going to be interesting to see the player that they don't take at 2, how far does he slide? Because Arvell Reese, to me, isn't going to fall out of the top 5, right? Tennessee's going to take him. Arizona might take him. The Giants should take him. Whereas David Bailey, maybe teams aren't in love with that type of player, and they can wait till 7 with the Commanders to take a David Bailey. But yeah, Mike LaFleur is – I hope they go offense. I think Mike LaFleur understands what happened last time in New York and why he didn't succeed as the offensive coordinator. I think he's going to change that this time around in Arizona. He's going to learn from his mistakes. We got a legend in the chat, Charles Gorman. What's up, man? I appreciate you hopping in here. Jeremiah Love is my favorite player in the draft. I have Love as my 3rd overall rated player based on tape alone. It goes Downs, Styles, and then Love. So I don't want to say he's my favorite, but he is very high up there on my board. And if the Jets were in a better position from a team building perspective, I could see it. I just don't know if it's, oh, yeah, let's go get Jeremiah Love. And yeah, we can just trade Breece Hall. We can just do away with Breece Hall. You're unplugging a hole in the boat, allowing water to come in just to hopefully plug it back up with Jeremiah Love, who I do think is going to be a talented player. I just don't know if it's worth the risk there when you can plug a already existing hole at front 7 on edge or inside linebacker. But appreciate the comment, Gorman, and thank you for hopping in here. Chris B, what's up, man? The most optimistic fan we've probably ever had in this community. He says, how could the prospect in Reese, whose all-around game is more dominant, also be a prospect who's riskier and needs a firm plan? Reese could modernize our defense, beat opponents in a multitude of ways. Yeah, no, this is completely fair. I don't know if I subscribe to the Reese is a riskier pick. I just think that the Jets have to have a more succinct developmental plan in place for an Arvell Reese, where, as you know, David Bailey, it's just go pin your ears back and go on 2nd and long, 3rd downs, obvious passing situations. So I don't want to say Reese is riskier, in my opinion, and I think they're both going to come in day one and make an immediate impact for this team. So, yeah, it's interesting how the narratives have kind of swayed back and forth from Reese to Bailey. At one point, it was Bain throughout the process. So it's going to be a very interesting next 10 days until the pick comes, and I would ultimately not be surprised if it was Arvell Reese being the selection. 104 of you guys in the room, please hit the like button, subscribe if you are new. 56 of you on YouTube, 48 on Twitter. We're getting a good mix now. It used to be very heavily YouTube and a few people watching on X. Now it's a little bit 50-50, but still 100 of you guys in the room. Super chats, $5 and up will get you on the wheel of names for the Curtis Martin signed mini helmet. Gifted memberships work the same way. One gifted membership is one entry on the raffle. I'm going to take a couple more questions here. We're just over the hour mark. Trying to keep these shows to under 90 minutes. I feel like that's a really good threshold for viewership. Anything longer than an hour and a half, and people start to get a little scared to click on a 2+ hour video. M. Villette says Taylor Green, baby. Yeah, he's Emory's wide receiver 2, or quarterback 2, excuse me. That was so interesting. And I had my question written out about Ty Simpson and how he stacks up with the class and what is the drop off from Ty Simpson to the next guy. And here comes Emory and he throws a curveball at me. And it's no, what is the drop off from his quarterbacks 3, 4, and 5 down to Ty Simpson at 6? And I mean, to then talk about a Monmouth quarterback at quarterback 7 on his rankings, that's just an incredible list from Emory Hunt. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I have no info on Derek Robertson until today, but it is very interesting to see just how skewed opinions can be across the league, because that's what 32 teams are doing right now. They're stacking their big boards and they're making it look the way that they want, prioritizing guys that they want to draft. And it's going to look a lot different after picks, let's say maybe 20. I think picks 20 to 85 to 100. Like there's going to be so many differing of opinions on that late round 1 to all the way through round 3. And that could mean a guy at 103 falls that the Jets didn't anticipate being there, or somebody takes a guy that's probably 30 picks too early, right? And they reach on a guy in the second or third round, and that helps bump a guy down to the Jets at 103. So it is going to be really interesting how the back end of round 1 plays out and everything like that. Taylor Green to me he's obviously not my quarterback 2. That would be Ty Simpson. I haven't fully stacked up the quarterbacks. I would say he's outside of my top 5 or 6, and there's guys that I would take over him, but you can't deny the athleticism, the arm strength is there. I just think he needs to work on his accuracy, reading defenses a little bit better, and obviously with good coaching, that can really help his development there. But you can't deny the 6'6", 235-pound body frame. That's something you certainly can't coach up with Green. Oh, and he ran like a 4.4, 4.37, so just a truly gifted athlete. Sean says, I'd take Bain over Bailey, but won't be mad at any of the 3. Please, no love. I get he's good, but not a need, and we have a lot of those. Yeah, I'm with you. I would go Reese, Bain, Bailey if I'm picking strictly between the top 3 edge rushers, or front 7 players, we'll call them. I would take Bain over Bailey as well. I'm not really in the market for Love. Like I said, I'm pretty high on Breece Hall. I think they're going to end up paying him a 3-year deal. That looks like a 2-year deal, but not in the mindset of making holes in the boat just to fill a hole, especially at the top end of the draft. I couldn't see it at 2 overall. Kyle Clifton with his 1-month membership gifted super chat. Thank you, Kyle. He says, will Denzel Boston make it to 33? I think so. He's meeting with a lot of teams right now. He met with the Jets, I believe, late last week. So there's a chance. I would say it's 50-50 because let's say hypothetically the Patriots can't trade for A.J. Brown, right? And they're not able to get him with that 31st overall pick. Could they just take a Denzel Boston, who they might view similarly to A.J. Brown? And then conversely, if they trade 31 to the Eagles for A.J. Brown, now the Eagles have pick 31. Maybe they take Denzel Boston to replace A.J. Brown. So I would say it's really close to 50-50. Stacking him against the players on my board, he would be there at pick 33 because you have to think about the edge players, the offensive tackles who are going to go, I believe, as high as 3 safeties could go. If you get 2 running backs drafted in the first round, right, Jadarian Price has been mocked late at the end of the first round by Peter Schrager. So I think there's a 50-50 chance. And if he's there at 33, I think the Jets would probably pull the trigger on Denzel Boston. Let's see what else we got. Adirondack Fly Guy says, DT, what's up, man? I appreciate you hopping in here. Clifton says Green is a developmental guy, the kind of guy we should be taking in this draft. Yeah, I agree. If they're not going to get a guy who they view as a starter by the end of year 1 or year 2, at least competing with whoever they have in the room to be the starter, go get a developmental guy in the 5th round and potentially we'll see what happens with the mix there. But yeah, I think developmental guy is probably the path that they're most likely to go down. Now they could get a Carson Beck because they feel like he's, probably a better option for them than a 6 to 8 million quarterback 2 off the free agent market. But yeah, I'm with you. If they're not going to go get a guy like Ty Simpson, just go get a developmental guy. The big fella, $2 super chat. I appreciate you, bro. He says draft Tate Sandell next year. Great show, DT. Yeah, we can't get him this year, unfortunately, as the Beast once said on Jake's show. But yeah, that's the kicker from Oklahoma. So yeah, I mean they're gonna need a kicker at some point. I'm actually in the minority that I thought not re-signing Nick Folk to $4.5-5 million a year. I thought that was actually a good move. by the Jets. Now he can go kick in a dome. Hopefully he can make 60-yarders in a dome because he struggled from like 55 and up in MetLife last year specifically. But yeah, we're going to need a kicker at some point. Adirondack Fly Guy, new member of the A1 since day one community. Thank you so much, Adirondack. And you are on the wheel for one entry into the Curtis Martin mini helmet giveaway that we'll be doing at 2,000 subscribers. All right, last one here from M. Villette. Over under 4.5 wide receivers in the first round. I have the under. I'm going to go over. I actually think, and this is probably the antithesis of your take, I think that 4 wide receivers could be gone before the Jets even pick at 16, right? Tate at 6 to the Browns. I think the conversation probably starts as early as 4 with the Titans, even though I don't see them going that way. I think they'll go defense for Robert Saleh. But 4, 5, 6 is the run starting for Carnell Tate. The Commanders, I don't know if they'll go wide receiver. I think they'll go defense. New Orleans, they could use a wide receiver for sure. Kansas City, they're going to need an offensive playmaker. Maybe it's Kenyon Sadiq. Maybe it's, Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon, whoever's there for them at 9. So that's another spot. 11, Miami. I think they're going to go defense for Jeff Hafley, but that's another one that could be a landing spot. 13, the LA Rams. They've kind of been all over the wide receiver market. They want a guy who can help them win now and push for another Super Bowl while they still have Stafford. And they're actively telling Devontae Adams that they're shopping him. The Ravens at 14. I think that could be another one to look at, depending on who's on the board, of course. And then Tampa Bay, I mean, they lost Mike Evans. I don't know if they'll go and try to replace a Mike Evans right away, but I would say that there's actually a chance that 4 wide receivers are gone before we even get to the Jets pick at 16, which would be really shitty. And that, to me, is a negative for Darren Muji because he didn't read the board well, and he comes away with wide receiver 5 or 6 at pick 16 overall, and it's somebody that they probably don't love or may not be fully in love with and have the conviction on in that selection. Adirondack Fly Guy, first he became a member, and now he is gifted a membership to the A1 since day one community. Thank you so much, Adirondack. You are in for another entry on the wheel. And last one here at the buzzer, Kyle Clifton, where do babies come from? Put me in the raffle. I'm sure Kyle has a very witty answer as to where babies come from. I think if you ask Charles Gorman, he still believes in the stork methodology. Haven't confirmed that yet, but I'm excited to hear your answer here, Clifton, as to where they do come from. But thank you so much for the $5 super chat. You are on the wheel for one more. That is 3 entries total for Kyle Clifton. And then we have the 2 for Adirondack Fly Guy going in as well. Appreciate everybody for their donations. Being completely transparent with the community here before we hop off. When I started this raffle, I didn't think it was going to stop my subscriber count. I have a feeling that Nick Shine is behind this. I think he's telling people not to subscribe to my channel, so I never hit 2,000 subs. And if that is the case, screw you, Nick Shine. But I am debating internally whether to end this raffle here and not today, but end the raffle before I hit 2,000. Maybe next week in our pre-draft show, we'll do it. And then I'll start up another raffle for when we hit the 2,000 subscriber mark. I mean, truthfully, I haven't had more than 2 subscribers since the start of April. I know, obviously, I was moving and things of that, so the content did dip a little bit. I only put out 2 shows. This is only my second live show since moving, but very, internally debating whether I should stop the raffle here and then start a new one for when we hit 2,000. We'll work through all that. But in terms of scheduling, no show tomorrow. Might do a pre-recorded for the channel, as well as a video we'll be dropping most likely for the Jets Roundtable that I will be doing tomorrow. And then Wednesday, we will be back a little bit of a later start on Wednesday, 8:30 with Joe Caparoso of Badlands. He will join us. Similar setup with Emory. comes on for 35 minutes or so, and then we will take your questions at the end. But we're going to discuss all of the latest about, the state of the Jets entering the draft, and we'll have a lot of fun with Joe. So that is Wednesday at 8:30. And at the actual buzzer, the big fella, $20 super chat. What's up, big fella? Thank you so much. He says, put me in. Belly's on the bed for the Curtis Martin mini helmet. I got you in here, big fella. Let me see how many entries. Big fella already had 3 entries, so he adds 4 more with this one. Big fella. Absolutely. Thank you so much. With that, we are going to wrap it up here. Hour and 15 mark, 110 of you guys still in the room. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Like Rob Davia says, love the channel. You're getting over 2K easily. Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. And I would never have thought within the first year of having my channel, I would be closing in on 2,000 subscribers. Today's the 13th. We're exactly 11 months into the birth of the Dylan Tereman YouTube channel. So thank you guys so much for all the support. I will be back Wednesday, 8:30 with Joe Caparoso of Badlands. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. DT signing out. And as always, let's go Jets.